Chiew. So Chiew is the founder and CEO of Classdo. So I would call a pioneer, if you may, of like EdTech. He's been exploring in this space from 7 or more years ago, developing his platform, and so he's quite a explorer of this virtual classroom, I would say. And what we want to do is chat with him to hear his journey, his thoughts, and maybe questions if you have, and then we can sort of look at this, explore the space together. So I think in the last few months, people who haven't been in this space has kind of quite quickly get on the platform, and also trying to be, it's a very steep learning curve for all of us using edutech tools. We see a lot of free versus paid ones, some very specific functions, and some of them are all in one. So I guess, would you say, Chiew, is there a must-have list that we should be looking at? So like a must-have 5 things in your toolbox. If so, what are those?
Right. So I get asked the question a lot. So, like when you actually send me the invite, like I actually did have something. So let me just share something. It's actually, like within the screen share already. I'm holding up my iPad. So this is actually a remote control. And like while I'm sharing my screen, my iPad, I just needed to shine a QR code on it. And so, all right. So I think for what you're talking about, right? So the must-have things in like your toolpad. The first thing is, I mean, we need to ask ourselves, right? In the physical world, right? There's nothing such as like like a one size fits all kind of education. So like in terms of like oh, what must I have in my toolpad? It just doesn't exist, like so in terms of that, like you need to ask yourself about your teaching style. So like basically the level of interactivity. So you need to think about like like the levels of interactivity. And so like you're so like are you doing like lectures, tutorials, discussions, like are you sort of like looking at do you use a lot of whiteboards, like do you use a lot of presentations? How do you actually teach? That is sort of like what is really important. And then the other one is the class size. So in terms of like like class size, like are you teaching like a lot of people at once, or are you teaching like just a few people? So that is like really, really important. And the third thing is that like you're actually looking at like what kind of materials that like you're actually teaching with. Like the kind of medium that you use. Like do you use like a lot of presentation? Like is it like physical demonstration with like a second camera? Like so you're actually showing like real stuff, right? And like do you use a lot of documents? And the fourth one is like the kind of like management and admin work that comes with you. Do you have it? Do you not have it? And things like that. So when it comes to sort of like your question of like which tools must I have, right? So you're really looking at like like stuff like this, which is the tool adapting to you, or are you adapting to the tool? So that's basically it, right? So like a tool that is adapting to you, like you're actually looking at like being more effective with a less time. But if you are adapting the tool, then you're actually looking at being less effective and with more time. So this is sort of like the things that I think you need to ask yourself. There's no sort of like standard answer to what is like like what is really needed in the 5 things. So I'm gonna just boil it down. The 5 things that you need, right? Come back and basically ask yourself, what is your teaching style first? And when you actually know the teaching style, you're actually judging like the tools based on your teaching style, and whether you are actually the tools can actually adapt to your teaching style, or are you adapting to you want to teach like this, but the tool doesn't let you do it, so you're just adapting to the tool.
That how about some of them, like all this functionality that's a bit like if you're a geek, it's a bit of a in the candy store now, right? Like every day, every other day you get a new tool. So is the newest tool or something with a lot of functionality, is that better? I mean, I know you talk about adapting to the style. But I think sometimes you can't help but get excited and you want to use 5 different tools in one class. I mean, I've attended classes where it gets very confusing. Go to Neopod and do this and then do this other thing. So do you have any thoughts around how much is enough, or what is the right amount?
Sure. I mean, like, again, what it is that, like, think about your teaching style first. And, whether you're teaching online or you're teaching physically, just find the thing that suits you. But, I get asked a lot for this as well. So I've got several slides, like, okay, so this is the 4 secrets to basically, like, judging by what, like what you actually need. Like, so the first thing is that, is it easy, right? Do you need install? Like, if you need you and all your students to install things, like that's actually really bad. And, like, is there a lot of passwords to remember? Like, I'm pretty sure that parents in Singapore would have like passwords to remember for a certain system. But, so, like, does it allow, like, for passwords to be forgotten and things like that? So, we're basically talking about the learning curve. So the learning curve is actually, that's something that, like, you should not have a learning curve. All right. And so the second one is that, like, is it as good as meeting in person, or is the tool as good as, like, just basically doing it physically, right? So does it have enough tools and things, like, for you to do your job, right? And so the third thing is that, like, is it smart enough? Like, does it sort of like automate away the things that, you do? So pretty much, like, like, the thing about software is that software should automate away everything that's automatable for you. And that leaves you room to be creative. All right. And so if it doesn't automate away the things, and, but it actually makes you do more work, then it's not good. But, like, if it's smart enough, it remembers everything that you do, so that it's okay for you to forget. You can actually just come back for it. Like, those are good things about it. And so the last thing is, like, it's, of course, it needs to be secure. So I'm going to come back to the question about like, like, oh, is new better or whatever. So if you actually sort of like judge your things by, is it easy? Is it as good as meeting in person? And, like, whether it's smart enough, and whether it's secure. I think, like, for these, like, like, if you actually abide by these 4 things, it's not whether it's new or it's not. Like, whatever new things or old things, you kind of want to just judge by, like, these 4 items. And I think you will be successful.
And I guess my next question will be, because in our audience, there are lots of people in the learning and development space, or people in the admin and management space as well. So I guess the question is, sometimes when you're individual, it's okay to go pick a tool and just try it out. It doesn't really switch to something else. But I think in a sort of organization, what would you think are considerations, or even as an individual, because sometimes it takes investment, like you say, invest the time to learn and make sure your students all pick it up. What are some of the key considerations which you have pointed out? Are there any long-term consideration? Because sometimes when we adopt a tool, once you're stuck into it and all your, let's say, content and also workflow is built into it. So I think from that perspective, is that something we should sort of consider before we commit to maybe some of the tools?
Right, precisely. I think, like, right now, I think, as one of the, like, one of the very prominent edtech people told me, right? Because, like, let's say, like, the circuit breaker has happened in Singapore, which is sort of like a lockdown, and just people just sort of like do something very short term. They'll go to something like a video conference, which a video conference is something that they know, because I'll just sort of like give you a quiz, like, between, say, a smartphone, which is an iPhone, and, like, let's say, video conference, like, like, which is the grandfather is Skype. Which one do you think came first? A smartphone came first, or video conference came first? Yeah, I mean, like, smartphones came out in 2007. Video conferencing came out in 2003, and it's just basically video conferencing and screen share. And if you actually look at smartphones, right, like, the usage for smartphones, everybody tries to use, like, smartphones, and right now everybody has a smartphone. doesn't matter which age. But video conferencing, which is sort of like, like many years ahead of like, it's 17 years right now. Video conference and screen share, it just literally just hasn't changed. And the reason why adoption for that is so bad is that people just think that, like just meeting physically is a lot more efficient. And therefore, whatever that you use needs to sort of like bridge that gap and, like make everything as efficient as meeting physically. So coming back, like to your question, like looking at long term, right? Yes, short term, like, like in terms of desperation, like, you're actually just grabbing whatever, like is sort of like the known thing. So you're screen sharing and, like you're sort of like, like just doing that video conferencing, which sort of like has been there around there for years and, like people know what to do. But when you think about long term, being long term and sustainable means that it has to be as effective as meeting physically or even more effective. Like for example, what Classdo does, right? Which is what I'm doing right now is that, it remembers everything for you. Like, whatever I write in here, like I come back into the room again and it's all in there. So it makes things a lot more effective and it saves you a lot more time. So if you get more effectiveness and less time, so that sort of like, will build into your long-term consideration. So I think you should ask yourself that question, like, if I'm going to use this long term, right? Does it make me more efficient and does it save me more time? And if it does, like, it's great. Like, whatever tool it is, just ask yourself these two questions. Does it make learning more efficient? And does it save you more time? So it applies to every single tool out there.
Yes, and I think audience had brought up a very good question as well. There's some discussion around it, learning objectives, right? So let's not get carried away and say, let's plug in this tool, let's do this because it's got this extra emoji or whatever, because I think ultimately we all have to focus back to what's the learning objectives? Is it beneficial for your students? So I think that's something we should definitely sort of look at.
Yeah, precisely, which is why I uploaded these two slides on, like, I kind of anticipated talking about these two topics, which is first, ask yourself what your teaching style is. Like, it doesn't have to change when you go online. The tool should actually adapt to you, which, like in Classdo, we actually do a lot of stuff to whether you are a very sort of like presentation teacher that you do a lot of lecturing, or you actually do like, like facilitate discussion, or you actually sort of like do any sort of like, like styles of teaching. We actually don't make you like adapt to one style, but, like we're actually designing a lot of these with like, education practitioners so that they would actually be able to teach in the style that they want. And so this is the kind of like effort that we put in for that. So ask yourself what your teaching style is. And the other one is, of course, like, like if you actually look at, what, like whether it is effective, like whether you're adapting to the tool or is the tool adapting to you, and I think you'll be fine.
So I guess just wrapping it up in, let's say, 60 seconds, maybe explain to us or help us reimagine the future of a digital classroom. So what can we expect if we sort of fast forward a few years or even a couple of years?
Sure. All right. Anyways, like, this is what, like I'm showing to you, like, like Classdo as sort of like a room, right? And we're actually working with a lot of educators for this. So of course, like I turn off the video chat for this one because we're on Hopin. So, like video chat should actually pop in here. Oh, I'm sorry. Like this is in a Japanese, like we actually have it in the English version. So like, of course, you can sketch and, like you can draw things. So this is your whiteboard. There's things that, like you can do things here and, like you can type together. So it's sort of like an interactive like typing screen. You can, of course, like do polls with people. There are contents, you can upload contents, you can sketch on it. So right now what I'm doing here is that, I am just doing this. And whatever you upload, like, like you can just like, like draw things around it, like, like do pens, draw things. And, like whatever you do, people would see it, like, it's all synced to you. So what we're trying to do is that, like we're actually emulating what you would actually do in a physical environment, but you actually don't have to travel. So again, like, we're adapting to your style instead of like, like you actually have to do something that's different online. And so, and of course, like, what I showed you just now was the remote control. So with, like I can actually walk around with an iPad and, like this is a touch screen and I can actually draw things and that would work. I can actually mount a second camera and, my phone actually becomes the second camera. I can show you like what I'm writing on paper and things like that. So essentially we are actually duplicating we're actually duplicating exactly what you do in a physical environment, but it's just virtual. What is my observation of mobile learning? So that's a good question. So Classdo actually works on every single device. So it actually we actually wanted to prevent digital divide. So it's actually very easy to get things working on an iPhone, but we actually went through all the pain to actually get it to work on like $100 Xiaomi's, which actually doesn't have like a lot of memory, it doesn't have a lot of processing power. So whatever device that you have, it works. And on Classdo, we actually do a lot of optimization. So it's actually a tool that's built for Southeast Asia. And we take into account like, bandwidth limitations, like, how would you call like unreliable bandwidth and things like that. So even with like all these things, like, it tries to reconnect, it tries to do, all sorts of different things to actually try to, like, that is, like we support the mobile, we support all sorts of, but 5G would actually change a lot of things. I think that it would actually flip, like basically the Western world and Asia around. The whole thing is because like in US, like like they're sort of like still bickering about like 5G technology, and like, oh, like we don't want this equipment, we want that equipment, and but Asia is just completely just rolling ahead with 5G. So you're gonna find like this reversal where like Asia suddenly is just gonna get like much faster um connections for people in education than a lot of more advanced countries. Yep. So yes, so Stuart, yes, we do actually have an online collaboration tool. So lots of many people can just collaborate at once. So if I have many people like just into the classroom room, like like people can can um, can sort of like just draw on it at once. It's almost like sitting side by side each other, and like I'm drawing on your book and I'm flipping the book, and when I flip the book, your book flips as well. So again, like that is real collaboration. Like I'm drawing something, you see what I draw.